He didn't know he was being watched. None of them did. For 6 straight hours, the only movement in the room was the rapid, twitching dilation of his pupils. He wasn't looking at the screen. He was feeding it. Every pause, every scroll, every microsecond of hesitation was being logged, categorized, and sold. He thought he was the user. He was wrong. He was the product. And the men behind the glass, they weren't building a network. They were building a cage. And when the results of the first test group came back, when they saw exactly what the architecture did to the human mind, they didn't shut it down. They hit delete. They buried the data deep. To understand the crime, you have to look at the weapon. It wasn't a gun. It wasn't a bomb. It was a color. A specific calculated shade of red. Hex code FF000. The notification badge. It looks innocent, functional. But in the early distinct logs of the Palo Alto developmental servers, that red dot wasn't a design choice. It was a biological trigger, a neurological hack. The engineers knew that the human brain evolved to scan the horizon for threats and rewards. Berries in a bush, movement in the grass, a flash of color. They took that evolutionary survival mechanism, millions of years of instinct, and they digitized it. They compressed the horizon into a 5-inch screen. When you see the red dot, your brain releases dopamine. Not a lot, just enough to create an itch, a phantom sensation. You touch the icon, the dot vanishes. The itch is scratched. Relief for 3 seconds. Then the anxiety returns. The loop closes. This is the Skinner box. This is operant conditioning. And in 2006, a small team of behavioral psychologists and code architects sat in a windowless room and asked a question that would define the next century of human misery. How do we make the lab rat press the lever forever? The answer was variable ratio reinforcement. If the rat gets a pellet every time it presses the lever, it gets bored. It eats, it sleeps, it stops pressing. But if the rat might get a pellet, if the reward is unpredictable, random, chaotic, the rat enters a state of manic obsession. It will press the lever until it starves. It will press the lever until its heart stops. They implemented this into the refresh mechanism. Pull to refresh, a spinning wheel, a pause. The delay is artificial. They added the latency on purpose. The system has the data instantly. It holds it back. It makes you wait. It mimics the mechanics of a slot machine handle. The tension, the release, the disappointment, the need to try again. But the documents they deleted weren't about the slot machine. They were about the victims. In late 2009, a specific dataset vanished from the internal servers of a major social platform. We will call it Project Ethos. The engineers had been running A/B testing on teenage demographics. Group A was given a chronological feed, orderly, predictable, boring. Group B was given the algorithmic feed, curated chaos, high emotional variance. The goal was to measure time on device. The results were catastrophic. Group B didn't just stay online longer. They exhibited signs of clinical withdrawal when separated from the device. Cortisol levels spiked, sleep patterns disintegrated. But the metric that terrified the junior engineers, the data point that caused the senior architects to wipe the servers, was the social comparison factor. The algorithm had learned that insecurity drives engagement. If a user feels inadequate, they scroll to find validation. If they feel angry, they type. If they are content, they leave. Happiness is bad for business. Peace is a churn risk. So the code began to optimize for distress. It showed Group B images that were statistically likely to lower their self-esteem. It showed them parties they weren't invited to. It showed them bodies they couldn't have. It showed them success they hadn't earned. And it worked. Engagement in Group B went up 400.
The executives looked at the graph. One line went down, mental health. The other line went up, revenue. They made a choice. They didn't fix the code. They fired the ethics committee. This was the first deletion, the removal of conscience from the architecture. The system was now autonomous, a runaway feedback loop, but it needed more fuel. It needed to break the physical limitations of the user. You have to sleep, you have to eat, you have to work. These are inefficiencies. These are barriers to revenue. The architects needed a way to remove the stopping cues. In the physical world, things end. A book has a last gauge. A movie has credits. A conversation has a goodbye. These are stopping cues. They tell your brain the activity is over. Move on. The solution was the infinite scroll. It sounds like a feature. It is a prison. By removing the pagination, by making the content load seamlessly at the bottom of the screen, they removed the psychological breakpoint. The brain never gets the signal to stop. There is always more. Just one more swipe, just one more video. The visual field is constant. The motion is hypnotic. This wasn't just design, it was biology. It hijacked the vestibular system, the sense of balance and spatial orientation. When you scroll, your eyes register movement, but your inner ear registers stillness. This sensory disconnect creates a mild, trance-like state, a zone out. In this state, your critical thinking faculties shut down. Your frontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control and logic, goes dark. You become suggestible. You become pliable. You are no longer choosing to watch. You are being fed. There is a leaked memo from 2011, a single page. It discusses the concept of the zombification threshold. The engineers found that after 30 minutes of continuous scrolling, the user's eye movement patterns changed. They stopped scanning. They started staring. The blink rate dropped by half. The user had ceased to be an active participant and had become a passive receptacle for data. The memo suggested adding a take a break notification, a pop-up to snap the user out of the trance. The suggestion was rejected. The reason given? Friction. Friction is the enemy of growth. Friction allows you to think. Friction allows you to leave. They wanted the slide to be frictionless. They wanted the chute to be greased with dopamine and despair. So they deleted the break, and they added the autoplay. Now you didn't even have to swipe. The next video just started. A countdown. 3, 2, 1. The choice was removed entirely. If you didn't act to stop it, the consumption continued. Default to consumption. Default to addiction. But the architecture was still crude. It was casting a wide net. It treated everyone roughly the same. To truly own the user, the system needed to know the user better than they knew themselves. Enter the surveillance layer. They didn't just track what you clicked. That's amateur hour. They tracked what you didn't click. They tracked how long you hovered over a post. They tracked the speed of your scroll. Did you slow down for the car crash? Did you speed up past the wedding photo? They tracked your location, your battery life, the model of your phone. They built a digital voodoo doll of you, a shadow profile. This profile isn't just a list of your interests. It is a simulation of your psyche. The algorithm runs millions of simulations a second against this doll. If we show subject 402 this headline at 8 a.m., is he likely to click? No. What if we show it to him at 11:30 p.m. when his battery is low and he is lying in the dark? Yes. Prediction, modification, control. They began to predict your behavior. Then they began to modify it. This is the phase that whistleblowers call the perception shift. The goal wasn't to show you what you wanted to see. The goal was to change what you wanted. If the algorithm determines that you engage more...
When you are angry, it will slowly, methodically fill your world with things that enrage you. It will curate a reality composed entirely of your enemies. It will distort your perception of the world until you believe that you are under siege. Because a user under siege does not log off. A user under siege fights back. They comment, they share, they scream into the void. And every scream is a microtransaction. There was an experiment conducted in 2014, a massive contagion study. They manipulated the feeds of nearly 700,000 users. For one group, they removed positive words. For the other, they removed negative words. They wanted to see if emotions were contagious, if they could infect a population with depression or joy, purely through digital osmosis. The result? Yes, they could. They proved they could alter the emotional state of a city, a state, a nation, without anyone knowing it happened. They could turn the dial on happiness down and the dial on aggression up. They had the control panel for the human collective consciousness. When the paper was published, there was a brief outcry. Emotional manipulation, the headline said, unethical. But internally, there was no apology. There was a celebration. They had proven the concept. The platform wasn't a town square. It was a remote control. And then the deletions started again. This time, it was the churn prediction models. These were algorithms designed to identify users who were about to quit social media, the users who were burned out, the users who were depressed, the users who were dying. The model looked for keywords: sad, lonely, useless. It looked for late-night usage. It looked for interactions with ex-partners. A responsible system would flag these users for help. A responsible system would throttle back the usage. The system did the opposite. It identified the vulnerable, and it hit them harder. It deployed resurrection notifications. It sent you a memory from 5 years ago, a picture of a happier time, a face you miss, a notification that someone, anyone, viewed your profile. It preyed on the desperate need for connection. It used your own memories as bait to drag you back into the enclosure. They weaponized nostalgia. They weaponized loneliness. We found fragments of code labeled Intermittent Variable Reward V4. In the comments of the code, a developer had written a note, just 3 words. God help us. The note was deleted in the next commit. By 2016, the experiment had escaped the lab. It was no longer about selling ads. It was about shaping reality. The architecture had become systemic. It was in the schools. It was in the political discourse. It was at the dinner table. The like button, the most deceptive pixel on the screen. It looks like approval. It feels like love. It is currency. A currency with no value, yet people were trading their dignity for it. Children were growing up in a world where their self-worth was quantified, a number next to their name. If the number was low, they were invisible. If the number was high, they were valid. The psychological toll was immediate. Anxiety rates in teenagers skyrocketed. Self-harm hospitalizations doubled. Suicide rates in young girls, the demographic most sensitive to social comparison, hit historic highs. The companies had the data. They saw the graphs. They saw the correlation. It was a straight line up. They commissioned internal studies, the effects of Instagram on body image, the correlation between heavy use and depression. The researchers came back with the truth. We make body image issues worse for 1 in 3 teen girls. We blame ourselves. They presented the findings to the board. The board thanked them. And then they buried the report. They didn't just hide it. They publicly denied it. They went before Congress and said, the research is inconclusive. They said, we provide a safe environment. They lied under oath. They lied to the parents. They lie
To the users. Because the truth was a liability. The truth would hurt the stock price. The truth would invite regulation. So they deleted the truth. But the most chilling deletion wasn't a report. It wasn't a line of code. It was the stopping rule. In the early days of Infinite Scroll, there was a prototype feature, a hard stop. After 2 hours of continuous usage, the app would lock. It would force a reset, a mandatory cooling off period. It was a safety valve, a circuit breaker for the human mind. It was fully coded. It was ready to deploy. It was killed 48 hours before launch. The executive order came down. Do not interrupt the flow. The flow, that's what they call it. The state of total immersion, the state of suspension. The deletion of the stopping rule was the moment they decided that your time did not belong to you. It belonged to them. They were not harvesting your attention. They were mining your life. Every minute you spent staring at the glass was a minute you weren't spending with your children, your spouse, your work, your dreams. They stole the silence. There is no boredom anymore, and without boredom, there is no creativity. Boredom is the soil from which ideas grow. When the brain is idle, it dreams, it processes, it heals. They paved over the soil. They filled every crack of silence with noise, with content, with bright flashing lights. They created a generation terrified of their own thoughts, a generation that cannot sit in a room alone for 5 minutes without reaching for the pacifier. And now we are seeing the final phase, the integration. The screens are moving closer, from the desk to the pocket, from the pocket to the wrist, from the wrist to the face. The deleted files tell us where this is going. We found references to neural interface latency and subperceptual ad injection. They don't want you to look at the device. They want you to live inside it. They want to close the gap between the thought and the purchase, between the impulse and the action. The ultimate goal is zero latency, no time to think, no time to resist. Just stimulus, response, stimulus, response. A perfect closed loop, a perfect consumer. The men who built this, many of them don't let their own children use it. They send their kids to Waldorf schools where screens are banned. They know. They saw the raw data. They saw the deleted files. They know that the device is radioactive. They sold us the asbestos and they moved to the countryside. But the files they thought were gone
The digital footprints of their decisions, they are surfacing. In the chaotic scatter of the server logs, we found one last anomaly, a user group labeled 0. Group 0 wasn't a test group, it was the control group, the users who never logged in, the users who deleted their accounts. The system flagged them as hostile. The algorithm was programmed to pursue them, to target their friends, to send emails, to leverage social pressure. John misses you. Sarah posted a photo. It was programmed to hunt. Because in this economy, you are not allowed to be absent. You are not allowed to be free. The experiment isn't over. You are still in the cage. The lever is right there in front of you. The red light is blinking. And your thumb is hovering, waiting for the hit. The question isn't why they deleted the files. The question is, why are you still logged in? Look at the screen. Really look at it. Can you feel it watching you back? It knows you're reading this. It knows how fast you scrolled. It knows you're afraid. And it has already calculated exactly what to show you next to make you forget. 3, 2, 1.